Welcome to our Explainer series. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, dramatic stories ever told. We're talking about the world's very first family feud, the story of Cain and Abel from Genesis chapter 4.
But you know, this is so much more than just a simple story of sibling rivalry. It forces us to ask some really deep questions. And that's what's going to guide us today. What can this story about the very first brothers teach us about the roots of jealousy, where violence comes from, and the very complicated birth of civilization itself?
All right, so let's set the scene. Adam and Eve are out of the Garden of Eden, and they have two sons, Cain and Abel. This is the first generation born into this new, tough world, and right away, we see a division. You've got Cain, the farmer, the guy who works the soil. And you've got Abel, the shepherd, who keeps the flocks. Now, both of them bring an offering to God from their work. Cain brings some of his crops, but Abel brings the best of the best, the fat portions from his firstborn lambs. And the result is just stark. God accepts Abel's offering, but he rejects Cain's. And here's the thing, the text never explicitly says why. That ambiguity, that rejection, is the spark that lights the fuse for everything that follows.
And Cain's reaction? It's intense. It's not just, a little disappointment. The text says he was very angry and his face was downcast. You can just picture it, that potent mix of rejection, shame, and this simmering, white-hot rage. This is the emotional core where the whole tragedy begins.
But before Cain does anything, before he acts on that anger, he gets a direct warning from God. This is such a critical moment. It's a turning point, a chance for him to face this darkness that's growing inside him.
And what God says here is one of the most famous lines in Genesis. Sin is basically personified as a wild animal, like a predator crouching right at his door waiting to pounce. It wants him. But God throws down a challenge, a choice. You must rule over it. He's telling Cain, you have to get a handle on these destructive emotions, or believe me, they will get a handle on you.
So here we are. Cain is at a crossroads. He's been warned. He has a clear choice to make. But that anger, that jealousy, it's just too strong, and it pulls him down a path of violence.
The Bible states it so plainly, it's almost cold. Cain invites Abel out into the field, a place of life, of work, and he turns it into the scene of the world's very first murder. The choice has been made, the line has been crossed.
And then, when God shows up and asks, "Where's your brother Abel?" Cain's response is just legendary. This defiant, sarcastic question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" It's a line that has echoed for thousands of years because it's more than just a lie. He's rejecting the entire idea that we have any responsibility for each other.
Of course, an act like this can't just happen without consequences. But Cain's punishment isn't death. No, it's something different, something you could argue is even worse, a life of total alienation.
The curse basically hits him in three specific ways. First, he's banished from the very ground he used to farm, which is now tainted with his brother's blood. Second, his entire identity as a farmer is ripped away. The earth won't produce for him anymore. And finally, he's doomed to be a restless wanderer. Think about that. A man with no home, no community, no roots. He's completely cut off.
And Cain gets it. He understands immediately what this means. To be an outcast, a wanderer in the ancient world, that's basically a death sentence. His fear isn't just about the curse. It's about revenge. He's terrified that someone is going to do to him exactly what he did to Abel.
And this is where the story takes a really fascinating twist. To keep Cain safe, God puts a mark on him. Now, a lot of people think this is a mark of shame, but it's the exact opposite. It's a mark of divine protection. God promises that anyone who kills Cain will have vengeance brought on them 7 times over. It's this strange, paradoxical act of mercy, protecting the murderer to stop the cycle of violence from just exploding right then and there.
So what happens next? Well, Cain, the wanderer, actually goes on to build a life and a legacy. But at the same time, the story gives us another path, a completely different direction for the human story to go.
And check this out. This is the paradox of Cain. This cursed exile, this wanderer, he founds the very first city. And his descendants, they become pioneers. They're the ones who invent animal husbandry, create music, and master the art of forging metal tools. The line of Cain basically represents the birth of civilization, technology, and culture. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Can great progress ever happen without some kind of moral shadow?
Because that shadow is definitely still there. A few generations down the line, Cain's descendant, a guy named Lamech, makes this absolutely chilling boast.
He takes God's promise of protection for Cain and twists it into a personal threat of insane, over-the-top revenge. He killed a guy for just wounding him, and he claims for himself a 77-fold vengeance.
You can see the problem clear as day right here. The violence that started with one murder in a field hasn't gone away. It's getting worse. It's escalating exponentially. What started as God's shield has been turned into man's sword, and it's been magnified by more than 10 times. This is the dark underbelly of Cain's innovative city-building world. But just when the story of Cain's line hits this peak of violent pride, the narrator pulls us back. We learn that Adam and Eve have another son, a third son named Seth. His name means appointed, because he's seen as the replacement for the righteous Abel who is killed.
So in the end, we're left with this tale of two family lines, two distinct paths for humanity. You have the line of Cain. It's all about human achievement, building things, creating art, but it's always shadowed by this escalating violence. And then you have the line of Seth. It's much simpler. It's the lineage from which people began to turn back toward God.
And that brings us right back to our big, final question. What is this ancient story really trying to tell us? Is it a grim forecast suggesting that humanity is just trapped in an inescapable cycle of violence that gets worse and worse? Or is it a timeless lesson about a fundamental choice that every single one of us has to make? The path of Cain, driven by anger, jealousy, and ambition, or the path of Seth, the path of humility and reconnection? The story doesn't hand us an easy answer. It just forces us to ask the question.